questioning. And the Screen magazine, in its second issue, tried to explain to me.
Hello, my name is Dean Contover, and this is a History Show. Today we have Richard Lawrence Greene. He's originally from Lowell, and he was an officer in the United States Army. He was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, so we're going to get right to that. But first of all, he was at UMass, he was ROTC, and then he went to flight school. Richard, where did you go to flight school?
Well, started at Fort Walters, Texas.
Fort Walters, Texas. That's where everyone went in the United States
for helicopter.
For helicopter training.
And then to Fort Rucker,
and
Alabama.
what was Fort Rucker? That was...
well, that had more Hueys, whereas the Fort Walters was just learning how to use the craft in a very small helicopter trainer.
I see. Okay, so basically, what was that trainer? There's a nomenclature for the trainer?
Well, they were getting rid of Bell and Hiller and going to a Hughes, which was a two-seat.
Which they use today, don't they? I mean,
I don't know if they use it for a trainer, but this is not the same one that became the Scout helicopter. It was that same company, but different model.
Oh, okay. So you learned on the Huey, is that?
No, then you went to the to learn the Hueys subsequently.
At Fort Rucker, Alabama.
Yeah.
Right? And how long were you there for?
Well, each of those two places, it was maybe 5 months or something like that. And after all was said and done, it's basically a year of helicopter training.
So you were a second lieutenant going through the schools.
Right.
Before you went to Vietnam, were you still a second lieutenant?
I became a first lieutenant in Vietnam.
In Vietnam, okay. And a lot of warrant officers were flying helicopters in those days.
Right. That was a separate program
for
people who were not ROTC graduates.
I see.
And that was a track into becoming a pilot, a specialist. Warrant officers tend to be specialists. A specialist type of job. And that's where they fit in.
Okay. So you get your second lieutenant, you graduate from UMass Amherst.
Yeah.
You get your second lieutenant bars. This is during, you were in ROTC during the war?
Well, it was ramping up at that point.
It was ramping up, okay.
Yeah.
So when did you graduate from UMass?
That was 65.
1965, okay. The war just was starting to be in the psyche of Americans, that type of thing. And so in 65, you graduated, you became a lieutenant, flight school, etc. Then you knew you were going to Vietnam.
Right.
So you get orders for Vietnam?
Yeah.
You remember getting those orders?
Well, I knew they were coming through, and they did, so it was no surprise.
Did everyone in your unit go to Vietnam? I mean, your school?
I believe everybody in that helicopter class did.
Okay, Richard, so then you got orders to Vietnam. How did you get to Vietnam?
That was simply getting a flight to Travis Air Force Base in California and a flight from there to Vietnam.
Non-stop?
No, it was 2 stops on the way.
Oh,
I think it was Hawaii and Guam, I believe.
Okay, all right.
Oh, I think we stopped at Midway too, I believe. Maybe it was
is that right? Yeah. Wow. Nothing going on there.
Not these days. It was all a blur, the flight, let me tell you.
Okay, yeah. So you land in Saigon?
Yeah.
Okay, Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base?
Right.
Okay. And what happens after that?
Well, it was a curious situation. I thought the police, the Air Force MPs were the most grimly armed soldiers I saw in my whole tour in Vietnam. They had all sorts of grenades and everything hanging off them. And anyway.
They had M16s at the bottom of the steps when you went downstairs, is that right?
It was sort of like that.
Was there a certain smell,
Yes.
You remember that specific?
That replacement unit, I thought it smelled like it had been built on a swamp or a latrine or something like that. It was not a pleasant place.
Everybody remembers that smell, don't they?
Yeah, and the replacement center looked like something from Hogan's Heroes. below Hogan's Heroes, barbed wire all around the place, and then tents and bunks, and it just as lackluster as it could possibly be.
So you get put in officers' quarters when you get there. Oh,
A bunk. You get a bunk.
All right. They put you in the bunk.
Yeah.
And what happened? Usually you get ordered. Once you get into the country, you have orders that specifically say the unit you're allegedly supposed to go to, and it doesn't always happen that way.
Right. I had initially been slated for the 1st Cav, but that changed, and so I was going to the 1st Infantry Division.
Okay.
And from Saigon, that's only about, I'll say, 20 miles away to Zion, which was the headquarters of the 1st Infantry Division. So that was a truck ride to Zion, and then we sat there for a number of days because they didn't allow anybody to go forward until they had been briefed by the generals. And one of the generals would brief all the new
Officers.
Yeah.
Or enlisted men too.
I don't know if they did the enlisted men, but we were all officers or warrant officers,
Okay.
and they wanted to brief all of us. The division had a motto, but it might as well have been, when in doubt, use artillery, because that was what they pushed. They pushed artillery in a big way.
So what happened with you? Who were you assigned with?
So I was assigned to the 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry. My branch was armor, so I was sent to an armored cavalry squadron within an infantry division.
A squadron is what, a company or a battalion?
It's a battalion.
It's a battalion.
Yeah.
So was it the only squadron attached to the 1st Infantry Division?
It was integral to the division.
Okay.
And it had a scout platoon, a lift platoon and then it had a gunship platoon, and it had an arrow rifle platoon and a long-range recon patrol.
So it's basically LRPs, as we call
Yes,
them in Vietnam,
and
right?
So basically many things that would support combat, but mainly support reconnaissance.
I see. Would you say arrow
Rifle, yeah.
platoon?
So that was a small, it was
So elite unit.
Huh?
It was an elite unit or just a
well, the
infantry?
LARPs.
LRPs were elite, yeah.
Yeah, the aero rifle platoon. I don't know that they were considered elite, but they had a specialized job. You know,
right.
anytime something had to be inspected on the ground, they were the ones that would.
You were assigned to what platoon?
The scout platoon with the OH-13 two-seat helicopter, the same type that dated from the years of MASH. And,
the bubble type helicopter.
That's the one.
How'd you get stuck with that?
I don't know, but after I got into it, I sort of enjoyed the fact that that's where I was.
Oh, okay.
Because I was my own pilot. There was no co-pilot. I was just entirely on my own, depending on what the orders were.
You were easy target, though.
We were easy targets,
Yeah,
right.
no doubt.
Yeah.
There's a picture of it up there on there.
Yes, that one has been just through what's called a hard landing.
Right.
It should be standing up on those skids rather than the skids spread apart.
Is that your helicopter? Or
yeah, result of
you had a tough landing.
Hard landing, they call them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a helicopter. And we also have a piece where your propellers were hit by a round. I don't know if you have a picture of that, where the top of the helicopter. There it is, right there.
Yes. So in approximately the center, just left of center, that arm that comes up has a chunk out of it.
Right.
And that's where the bullet went through. That's the pitch change horn. It's considered.
If it hit in a different angle, you would have been down.
Quite likely. It's a little unclear whether or not you can fly without a pitch change horn or not.
Yeah,
but you don't want to be the one to test it. So.
Right. All right.
And the same flight, we got one through the cockpit bubble, and one way back on the tail section. There's a little piece that goes across, and it went through that. And if you sighted through it, it looked like it was going to hit the tail rotor gearbox.
You would have been gone.
It would have been in tough shape.
That's another
Yeah.
shot. Now, there's a picture we have of blood in the seat. How did that situation happen?
Yeah, I was flying our operations officer, the squadron operations officer, and he wanted to go out and look at the local area and see if there was anybody moving or anything out there.
Right.
We were alone, which was sort of contrary to the way we normally work. We usually worked in at least two scout planes,
Yeah, if something happens,
and maybe with gunships overhead. But this time, we just went out, and there was a little creek valley, and we went up inside the creek valley, not the best thing to do, and he fired a grenade into the tree line. And then we heard shots after we went by, and we turned around, and I straightened some grenade pins, and he had his grenade launcher ready. But when we got close to that tree area, shots started to happen, and he was hit in the leg, right in the thigh.
I see.
Yeah.
So you broke contact and you flew back to base. Yeah.
Yes. And he survived. We were I was within 5 minutes of a place where there was a medic, and put the squadron field headquarters. We put it down there. The medic went to work on him right by the skid of the aircraft.
Wow.
I put saline solution into him.
Right.
And he was, there was a field hospital at Lighthearted, another 5 or 10 minutes away. And he survived. He was quite some time in the hospital, but he did survive.
Okay. Did he come back to the unit?
He was near the end of his tour.
Oh, okay.
Which was not a good time
what
to get
rank?
shot.
Yeah. What rank was he?
A major.
A major. Okay.
Yeah.
He was. You have to listen to a major. If he wants to go someplace, you have to take him there, right?
Yeah. Well, I was happy to oblige.
Right.
But it was that particular stream valley was sort of a hotbed because we had had other incidents, and subsequently had another incident there where one of our scout ships was doing some reconnaissance. Excuse me, one of our clowns, lift ships, Huey, was doing some reconnaissance, and they saw somebody running down below, and so they went in low level after him, and immediately they got opened up on, and the co-pilot in that plane was wounded right through the neck, but it did not hit anything critical, and he was back to the unit within a week. And they had the aero rifle platoon members who were aboard had a puppy, and the puppy was hit by a bullet and killed.
Wow.
But every human survived. But it was
okay,
it almost looked subsequently as if it were an ambush, that they put this guy down there running to sort of attract attention, and then opened up on the plane.
Well, that's what they do in combat, don't they? I
Yeah.
mean, it's they play tricks, right? It's all mind, psychological warfare. I mean, in actuality. So, there's a lot to talk about as a helicopter pilot. You've seen a lot, right? Do you remember any stories that you want to tell us? I mean,
I was just thinking last night, and I have one sort of lighthearted story.
I like lighthearted.
Yeah, not everything. Having been over there yourself, you know there are funny things.
Right, right. That's true.
So I was at a field location where the engineering units were crashing down
Great engineers,
brush.
those guys.
And
engineers first, then infantry.
Anyway, a major from our unit came over to my plane and said, "Okay, I need to go here." And he pointed to the map, and it was a location just north of the big runway at Benoit, where much of the aviation went in and out. Well, the transports and trips back to the United States.
It was a big air base.
Yes, it was huge.
Yeah.
But this was outside, just to the north of the runway. And okay, I'll take you over there. So we took off, and I thought, well, maybe I can just do this low level and not even bother to go up to altitude. So I took off over the jungle, low and fast, And I said, well, there's a big island in the Dong Nai River. And I passed a stretch of water, and I said, okay, now I'm over the island. And I was over the island, and the island didn't stop. It kept going and going and going. And then after some length of time, I realized, well, I must have missed the island altogether. I'm over the mainland. So I started to raise the front of the helicopter up just enough so that I could get a little visibility. And then straight ahead, I could see the very place where we were supposed to land with some tanks and some helicopters there, and so that's it. So after having lifted about 20 to 40 feet above the trees, I just sort of worked it into an approach and landed right to this very spot that he wanted to go. And he turned and looked at me. He said, that was the best piece of low-level navigation I have ever seen.
Oh, good.
And I had been lost. And so I sort of shrugged as if, all in the day's work. I didn't have great rapport with this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, so
sometimes that happens in the military.
He went into his meeting.
Right.
I got on those maps, figuring out the exact heading I have to do to do it in reverse. And so when he came out, I didn't go up to altitude. I just stayed low level and went right back to our troop location. And he was nowhere the wiser, But.
Yeah, exactly. When you talked about low level, what's that mean in regards to high level?
Well, we were told to fly on the deck or at least 1,500 feet or above. If you're on the deck, you're probably blocked by trees from enemy fire. They have less time to see you.
In other words, you're over them by the time they can get
something like that, or there's a tree in the way or whatever. But if you go to 1,500 feet, you're sort of getting beyond their effective range. And when we flew on the deck, we were low, very low. And I can remember going out with another pilot one time. He was in the lead ship, and it was a field with some tall grass. I couldn't see his skids. He was flying so low.
Wow.
His skids were almost in the grass.
Right.
And so low. We went very low.
Did you have any weapons on board your helicopter?
Well, personal weapons.
Only.
After a while, one of the planes we equipped with an M60 machine gun, sort of experimentally. And
how did that work?
It worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you wish you had it.
But normally it was M16s and a few hand grenades.
That's a personal weapon, though.
That's right. And then smoke grenades were important because you could use those to mark the target for the gunships that were working with you.
So the gunships, who were the outcasts, the clowns, and the Mustangs?
The outcasts were the guys I was with, the observation helicopter.
Okay, all right.
And then the clowns were the lift people we called them slicks, helicopters that were not really armed helicopters except for door guns.
So they would lift equipment?
Well, no, they would take the aero rifle platoon.
Oh,
mainly.
okay, I see, okay. Rifle platoon,
Yeah.
To hit the ground if there was enemy,
yes,
they'd be the first in.
Well, it was, rather than an assault basis, it was usually for some special question that had arisen, check out an area that seemed to be free of fire and go in onto the ground and pick something up that had been left or something.
Okay.
And then the Mustangs were the gunship platoon.
Okay, a gunship is what, 2 pilots?
A Huey.
A Huey.
And in those days with various configurations of weaponry, rockets and what they called flex guns that were machine guns that could be aimed.
I see.
Yeah.
So they were your backup. When you were flying first, they were above you or behind you?
Yes, frequently above us.
If you needed them,
we could drop smoke.
Okay.
And hopefully...
What color smoke?
Well, anything but red. Well, if it was enemy location and you thought there was enemy there, you would try to drop red. But then sometimes you just wanted a marker of some sort, so it might have been yellow or whatever.
When I say Viet Cong, what does that mean to you, or North Vietnamese?
Yeah, well, initially we thought we were dealing with Viet Cong, but it was actually North Vietnamese that were coming into the area.
There. So, were they battalions, regiments, or?
Well, frequently intelligence would plot a regiment. This is the 264
Alleged.
Viet Cong regiment
Right.
is located here.
Right.
You really had no idea what that meant. You know, were they right? Were they wrong? What was the strength of the regiment? Was it just a cadre of people left over after years of battle? It was problematical.
Now, there's a picture of you of a North Vietnamese, I believe, because the picture shows as he's in uniform. They were bringing him to your helicopter.
Yeah.
And what was that all about? What was the story behind that? Because to put somebody that's not cuffed on your helicopter or whatever, there's a picture of it now on the screen.
Yeah. So the story was that he had shot his companions and wanted to surrender. That more than anything, he wanted to get out of the North Vietnamese army.
So he came from the north all the way down to
Yeah,
South
he had
Vietnam.
been all the way down the Ho Chi Minh Trail or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I flew up to this location with an intelligence officer because the fellow, they wanted to interrogate him, find out what he knew.
Right. You want to interrogate somebody right away because he has fresh information.
And his rank was not high, but it was not a common private. Based on their rank, he was a little further up the chain, so he probably knew more than...
A sergeant, maybe? Or?
It might correspond to a buck sergeant or something like that. So the special forces at this camp wanted to retrieve the weapons. He said he had shot his buddies and left the weapons. And so they asked him if he would take a patrol up through the jungle to find these weapons and bodies. And he agreed to do that. Of course, I wasn't in on the conversation, so who knows what that was all about.
Yeah, exactly.
But they were a couple of miles away from the Special Forces camp along an old road which was mostly grown over, and they were making their way up to this location where he said they would find the gear and the bodies. So I was sent to bring the fellow back to the Special Forces camp. And among other things, it meant landing in a very awkward spot where there was just enough room for the rotors.
I can see that the road, there's a picture up there. Where
and
pretty good flying.
It was pretty close when you got closer to him.
Right.
And so I landed, and then I realized that this guy is not going to be handcuffed or anything like that. And so I took my .45 and I put a round in the chamber, and then I put it under my left thigh, so if the guy, and every reason to believe that he was mentally
stable.
Unstable.
Unstable?
Yeah. I mean, because he had just killed his buddies and he turned himself in and so forth.
So he was a Choi Hoi.
Yes, Chu Hoi.
Chu Hoi, program, okay.
Yeah. So he was brought up, as you can see, by the Special Forces.
And you took that picture,
Yeah. And then he hopped in next to me, and we got his seatbelt on.
Yeah, right.
And we took off. It was not too bad a takeoff because there was plenty of room there. And the patrol was stretched out down that road, and as we went away, he was waving to people as if they were his new buddies, you know. And then we got up to about 500 feet, and he's still waving. And I thought, I'm not sure about this guy. But he at no point gave any indication of being violent. And he hardly seemed to notice that he was in a helicopter. I mean,
because it was probably the first time he ever flew in a helicopter.
Well, yeah, but he wasn't looking around or anything. It was like he was totally blank. And you really feel this is what they meant by combat fatigue in World War II, or shell shock. Right. The guy was the guy was just not all there.
So what happened to him once you brought him
So
back?
I brought him
base
back
camp?
to the Special Forces camp,
Yeah.
where they had a slick, Huey,
Yeah.
revved up, and Huey could get back to the 1st Division much faster than I could, and they took him back to.
So did you see him again?
Never saw him again. No.
Never saw him again.
Yeah.
No. Did you hear anything about him? I mean,
No, you don't hear much from
Yeah.
things like that.
yeah, you were just a second lieutenant.
And I wasn't in intelligence. I was
Yeah.
in armored calves.
Right.
So
need to know.
yeah.
Right.
So they're not good with follow up on stuff.
No,
Like that.
they don't have time.
And so all you can do, as we were just saying, is pick up the rumors and see what somebody knows, because somebody else may have talked to somebody in intelligence who knows
Right,
a lot
right.
more about a specific case or an issue.
Right. So I mean, so Special Forces, did you work with them too? I mean,
Just rarely.
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, they were out there.
They were out there, yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
in very isolated places.
and they had what CIDGs?
Yes, Civilian Irregular Defense Force, I think it was
I think
called.
we have a picture of that CIDG camp.
And they were, they
Yeah, there it is. Right
Yeah,
there.
and they-
That's what they lived in. They lived in those tents.
yeah, ponchos over
Yeah.
them for rain and
Yeah.
tough
in
situations.
the rains too.
Yeah. And presumably they were like mercenaries who had been hired in from someplace. There was a suggestion that a lot of them were Cambodian who were there for the pay, and it was always said that a certain percent of them were believed to be North Vietnamese, there to pick up information and training. So anyway, you don't know too much about them.
Yeah.
If you don't speak the language, you don't
Yeah.
learn
Were
much
they
about it.
Montagnards or were they?
Some of them may have been, yeah.
Yeah, Montagnards.
Yeah.
So they were getting paid basically to fight,
Yeah.
more or less. I mean, yeah. I did hear stories on Cambodians as mercenaries, as units in what were you, 2 Corps? 3 Corps. You were
Two.
3, you were 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, that they were mercenaries down around Saigon in that area, but there's no detail. to look
Well,
that up.
I remember hearing once that intelligence referred to CIDG, but then there was something else called Mike Force, and the Mike was for mercenary, so the CIDG, I guess, were a step above Mike Force or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah,
only somebody in intelligence could sort that one out.
Yeah, we have a map that we're going to talk about in the second show, that so people could watch a second show. So I don't know if we can get the map up. That's the area that you operated in.
Yes.
Around Cu Chi.
Yes, Cu Chi was a 25th Division area.
Okay. Okay.
And
I
we-
see.
Yeah, and we were just across the river in, where you see Bencat. Phu Loi was south of that, down about where the bottom of the
Okay.
gray area is. And that's where I was flying from.
I see.
Phu Loi.
Phu Loi.
And then you can see Saigon is about an equal distance again,
Right.
down at the bottom of the
Right.
map.
So you were on Highway 13.
Yes.
Highway 14.
Highway 13,
okay.
yeah, 14 does not.
It
That was-
intersects north
Well,
of Saigon.
yeah, but Highway 14 was like not even in use really.
Yeah.
It was just overgrown and so forth. But 13, they called it Thunder Road
Okay.
in our unit because
What I want to talk about in the next show is in regards to your situation where you were throwing hand grenades at the enemy and shooting at them with your M16 because you didn't have any armament on your helicopter.
well, we can go into all that.
Yeah, okay. We'll do that in the next show because we have less than a minute. But
Yeah.
I want to talk about B-52 bombings
Yeah.
that you visually saw and so
Yeah.
forth like that, and the worry about you getting shot down by artillery because it's your trajectory possibly hit you, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's talk about that in the next show and